The red warning light flashed across Tom Reed's console, jolting him from his half-sleep. After 3 months alone at Outpost 47 on the frontier planet Astra, any alert was worth attention. He straightened his lanky frame and squinted at the display. "Unidentified craft entering atmosphere," announced the mechanical voice of the station's eye. "Impact trajectory detected." Tom grabbed his field jacket and rushed to the observation deck. Through the reinforced windows, he spotted a streak of fire cutting across Astra's lavender sky. Not a ship, he realized. An escape pod. And it was coming down fast, less than 2 kilometers from his research station. The Galactic Science Directorate had placed him here to study Astra's unique ecosystem, not to deal with emergency rescues. Protocol dictated he should call for backup and wait. But backup was 3 days away at best, and whoever was in that pod might not have that long. "Prep the rover," Tom ordered the AI as he grabbed his emergency kit. 20 minutes later, he stood before the smoking wreckage half buried in Astra's soft purple soil. The pod's design was unfamiliar, sleek black material with organic-looking ridges. Tom's scanner detected a life sign inside, but interference prevented species identification. Using his plasma cutter, Tom carefully created an opening in the damaged hull. As the section fell away, he stepped back in shock. Inside lay one of the most feared creatures in known space. The Night Stalker. Even injured and unconscious, it was terrifying. Nearly 2 meters long, with a midnight black exoskeleton and limbs that ended in natural blades. Its head featured multiple sensory organs and a mouth that could tear through starship hull material. Every spacefaring species knew to avoid Night Stalkers. The Galactic Council had quarantined the entire void sector because of them. They were apex predators, killing machines without mercy or reason, or so everyone believed. This one was badly hurt. Dark fluid leaked from wounds along its side. One limb was bent at an unnatural angle. Tom knew the protocol for this situation too. Terminate the threat immediately. Instead, he found himself loading the creature onto his rover. "This is probably the dumbest thing they have ever done," he muttered as he secured the unconscious Night Stalker. Back at the station, Tom converted his lab into a makeshift medical bay. He studied the creature's biological readings, amazed by its complexity. The Night Stalker had a triple-chambered heart, redundant nervous systems, and cellular structures unlike anything in the galactic database. "You're not what everyone thinks you are you?" Tom whispered as he treated the wounds. 3 days later, as Tom was checking the creature's vitals, its eyes snapped open. 6 pupilless orbs the color of deep space fixed on him. Tom froze, suddenly aware of how close he stood to those natural blades. The Night Stalker made no move to attack. It simply watched him, head tilting slightly as if puzzled. "Can you understand me?" Tom asked, knowing it was futile without a translator. To his shock, the creature tapped one blade-like appendage against the metal table in a deliberate pattern. Once, twice, pause. Once, twice, pause. Mathematics, the universal language. Tom repeated the pattern back, then added a 3rd tap. The Night Stalker responded with 4 taps. Tom laughed softly. "Simple counting. You're intelligent." The creature slowly rose to a sitting position, movements careful and controlled. It gestured toward its treated wounds, then back to Tom. "Yes, I helped you," he said. "I know what they say about your kind, but I couldn't just let you die." The Night Stalker's posture changed, relaxing slightly. It extended a limb toward Tom. The blade folded back to reveal what appeared to be sensitive appendages beneath. Tom hesitated, then reached out his hand. Their 2 completely different physiologies touched, the first peaceful contact between a human and a Night Stalker in galactic history. Neither could have imagined how this moment would change everything. The next week at Outpost 47 was unlike anything Tom had expected when he'd taken this remote assignment. He'd managed to build a crude translation device using parts from the Night Stalker's escape pod and his own equipment. The results were rudimentary but functional. "My designation is The translation came through as a series of clicks and hums before the device settled on. Closest sound in your language might be shadow. Tom nodded, fascinated by the creature's willingness to communicate. I'm Tom Reed, human scientist. Shadow's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. Human. Your species is known to us. Curious. Adaptable. There was a pause. Unpredictable. And your species is feared by everyone, Tom replied. He gestured to Shadow's healing wounds. Who did this to you? The translation device struggled with Shadow's complex answer, but Tom pieced together a disturbing story. Shadow had been captured by poachers who trafficked in exotic species. They had planned to sell parts of Shadow's body on the black market. The blade limbs were apparently worth a fortune as ceremonial weapons. But you escaped, Tom said. Yes. Killed 3 captors, damaged their ship, took escape pod. Shadow's posture shifted in what Tom was beginning to recognize as discomfort, not mindless killing. Survival. Tom found himself nodding. I understand. Their conversation was interrupted by the station's alert system. Incoming transmission from Astra Central Command. Tom quickly directed Shadow to hide in the storage room. The screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Director Marsh. Reed, routine scan picked up unusual energy readings from your station. Report. Tom kept his expression neutral. Just testing some new equipment, Director. Nothing to worry about. Marsh's eyes narrowed. We're also picking up an unidentified biological signature. Care to explain that? Before Tom could answer, the door to the lab slid open. 2 security officers from the central station had arrived via shuttle without alerting him. Between them stood Dr. Blake, the xenobiologist who occasionally visited to check on Tom's research. We detected the signature from orbit, Blake said, pushing past Tom. Where is it? Reed? The storage room door opened, and Shadow emerged. The security officers immediately drew their weapons. Stand down, Tom shouted, placing himself between Shadow and the guns. He's intelligent and non-hostile. Non-hostile. Blake laughed harshly. It's a Night Stalker, the most dangerous predator known to galactic science. You're wrong, Tom said firmly. Everything we think we know about them is based on fear, not facts. Shadow was captured by poachers. He was defending himself. It has a name now. Director Marsh's voice cut through from the screen. Reed, I'm ordering immediate termination of the specimen. This is a serious breach of protocol. Shadow moved forward slightly, blade limbs shifting into what Tom now recognized as a defensive, not aggressive posture. I can speak for myself. Shadow's translated voice filled the room. My people avoid contact with other species because of reactions like yours. We are hunters, yes. Predators, yes. But not mindless killers. The security officers looked uncertainly at each other. Dr. Blake stepped back, shock evident on his face. It's talking. Marsh stammered from the screen. Tom seized the moment. Shadow has shared information about his species that contradicts everything in our databases. This is a first contact situation, not a security threat. If you wanted to kill me, Shadow added, your weapons would not be fast enough. Yet I stand here, talking. A tense silence filled the lab. Finally, Blake lowered his scanner, curiosity overtaking fear. The physiological complexity is remarkable. Director Marsh's face had gone pale. Reed, you have 24 hours to prepare a full report. This goes beyond your authority. The Galactic Council will need to be informed. After the transmission ended, the security officers reluctantly withdrew, leaving Tom, Shadow, and a fascinated Dr. Blake. You took a massive risk, Blake said to Tom. Tom glanced at Shadow. Some risks are worth taking. I think we're about to rewrite everything we thought we knew about the most feared species in the galaxy. Shadow's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, and perhaps what we thought we knew about humans as well. Tom knew they were running out of time when the station's long-range sensors detected the approaching Galactic Council vessel. Its signature was unmistakable. A Judgment-class cruiser, typically deployed for high-level enforcement actions. "They're not coming for a friendly chat," Tom said, hastily packing essential supplies. Dr. Blake, who had stayed to study Shadow, looked up from his data pad with concern. "The Council doesn't send a Judgment cruiser unless they intend to eliminate a threat." Shadow moved with fluid grace around the lab, helping to gather equipment. Over the past 3 days, his communication with Tom had improved dramatically. "Your Council fears what it does not understand. My kind has experienced this before. We need to leave," Tom decided. "My research vessel isn't much, but it's faster than it looks." Blake's expression showed conflict. "Reed, this is career suicide. Possibly actual suicide. The Council will dissect Shadow to study him," Tom replied firmly. "I won't let that happen." "Why risk everything for a creature you barely know?" Blake asked. Tom glanced at Shadow, who was carefully handling delicate laboratory equipment with surprising gentleness. "Because everything we've been told about his species is wrong. And if we're wrong about the Night Stalkers, what else might we be wrong about?" Blake finished. The station alarms blared suddenly. "Council vessel requesting emergency docking," announced the AI. "Blake, I need 15 minutes. Can you stall them?" Tom asked. The xenobiologist sighed. "Against my better judgment, yes. But Reed, be careful. The Night Stalker." "Shadow," Tom corrected. "Shadow," Blake amended, "may be more complex than we thought, but he's still the galaxy's most efficient predator." As Blake left to intercept the Council representatives, Tom and Shadow hurried to the small hangar where Tom's research vessel waited. The ship wasn't impressive, an older explorer class with modifications for scientific work, but it had one advantage. Tom had disabled its standard tracking systems months ago to avoid disruption during sensitive experiments. Once aboard, Tom powered up the engines while Shadow examined the ship's systems with evident curiosity. "Your technology is inefficient," Shadow commented, "but adaptable. Like your species." "Thanks, I think," Tom replied as he initiated launch sequence. They lifted off just as the Council representatives burst into the hangar, weapons drawn. The last thing Tom saw through the view screen was Blake's face, a mix of worry and, surprisingly, hope. 3 days later, after a series of random jumps to throw off pursuit, Tom finally felt safe enough to have a real conversation with Shadow. They drifted in a remote system, the ship's power reduced to avoid detection. "Why did the poachers want you?" Tom asked. Shadow's multiple eyes focused on the distant stars visible through the viewport. "My kind possesses biological compounds valuable to other species. Our blade limbs never dull. Our exoskeleton resists most weapons. Some believe consuming our organs grants strength." "That's terrible," Tom said. "It is why we hide," Shadow explained. "Long ago, my ancestors tried peaceful contact with the early Council races. They were hunted to near extinction. We retreated to the Void Sector and became what you call monsters to protect ourselves." "But you're not just predators," Tom observed. "Your understanding of science, mathematics. We are hunters, yes, but also builders, thinkers, creators." Shadow made a sound the translator couldn't interpret, something like a laugh. "Your Council portrays us as mindless killers, because it is easier than admitting their ancestors committed genocide." The ship's sensors suddenly chimed an alert. 3 Council vessels had entered the system. "How did they find us?" Tom muttered, scrambling to the controls. "They are hunting," Shadow said simply. "As my kind would. Predict the prey's movements." As Tom prepared the ship for another jump, Shadow placed a blade limb gently on his shoulder. "There is a place we could go," Shadow said. "My home. But I have never brought an outsider there. It would require absolute trust." Tom looked into Shadow's alien eyes and made his decision. "Show me the coordinates." As the ship disappeared into jump space, neither of them realized they were about to change the course of galactic history forever. The Council pursuit ships maintained a relentless chase through 3 star systems. Tom's research vessel, while modified for speed, wasn't designed for extended evasion. Each jump drained their power reserves dangerously low. "We need to refuel," Tom said, studying the navigation console. "There's a trading outpost in the Mira system. Not exactly council-friendly." Shadow moved to examine the star chart. His dark exoskeleton gleamed under the ship's lights. "Dangerous. The council has informants everywhere." "We don't have much choice," Tom replied. "We're down to 18% power." The outpost orbited a barren moon, a collection of interconnected habitation modules and docking tubes that served the less reputable spacers of the sector. As they approached, Tom activated the ship's external camouflage system, altering its registry signature. "Keep your hood up," Tom told Shadow, handing him a massive cloak. Even here, a night stalker would cause panic. They docked at a peripheral port and made their way to the fuel merchant, a bulbous four-armed alien named Gorb. "Reactor-grade cells. That'll cost you," Gorb said, eyeing Tom suspiciously. "Not many research vessels out this far." "Just fill the tanks," Tom replied, sliding over his credit chip. Gorb's attention shifted to Shadow, who stood silently behind Tom. "Your friend doesn't talk much." "Religious vow of silence," Tom improvised. They were nearly back to their ship when the outpost's public screens flickered. A council announcement appeared, showing images of Tom and a blurry shot of Shadow. "Attention all citizens," boomed the official voice. "Thomas Reed, human xenobiologist, is wanted for theft of council property and harboring a Class 1 biological threat. Report any sightings immediately." "Run," Tom whispered. They hadn't made it halfway to the docking bay when shouts erupted behind them. 3 bounty hunters, drawn by the substantial reward, had recognized them. "Split up," Shadow instructed. "I will draw them away." Before Tom could protest, Shadow darted down a side corridor. The movement was so fluid and fast that Tom momentarily forgot he was looking at a sentient being rather than a force of nature. Tom hurried toward their ship, hearing distant shouts and then sudden screams. He winced, hoping Shadow hadn't killed anyone. Moments later, Shadow appeared at the ship's airlock, moving with impossible speed. "They live," Shadow said, noting Tom's expression. "Unconscious, not dead." As they detached from the station, alarm klaxons began blaring. 2 small interceptor ships launched in pursuit. "They're faster than us," Tom said grimly. Shadow moved to the weapons console. "I can target their propulsion systems." Tom was about to agree when a notification appeared on his screen. A secure transmission request using an old scientific quartz encryption. "Tom, it's Blake," came the voice as Tom accepted the call. "I don't have much time. The council is lying about why they're hunting you." "What do you mean?" "I accessed their secure files after you left. There's a secret faction within the council that's been hunting Night Stalkers for decades. They're harvesting biological compounds from them to create weapons. They've nearly wiped out the entire species." Tom glanced at Shadow, who had gone completely still. "My people sensed our numbers dwindling," Shadow said. "But we didn't know why so few returned from hunting expeditions." Blake's voice became urgent. "They're jamming me. One more thing. Counselor Vex is leading the operation. The transmission cut off. The interceptors were closing in. I know a way through the CT Nebula," Tom said, plotting a new course. "It's risky, but the radiation should mask our signature." As they evaded the interceptors, Shadow revealed critical information. "My homeworld lies beyond the nebula. Few outsiders know of its location." "You trust me enough to show me?" Tom asked. Shadow's 6 eyes focused on him. "You sacrificed everything to help me. And now we know the truth. My people face extinction. We need allies." Tom nodded solemnly. "The council can't be allowed to continue this secret genocide." As their ship disappeared into the swirling gases of the nebula, Tom realized how far he had come from his quiet research post. He was now a fugitive, harboring the galaxy's most feared predator, heading toward a planet no human had ever seen, and preparing to challenge the Galactic Council itself. Against all odds, he felt more alive than ever before. The Night Stalker homeworld emerged from the viewport like a dark jewel set against velvet space. Unlike the bright blues and greens of Earth, this planet displayed deep purples, blacks, and occasional flashes of bioluminescent activity, visible even from orbit. Nightfall, Shadow said, his voice containing something Tom recognized as pride. Home. As they descended through the upper atmosphere, Tom's scientific mind raced to catalog everything he saw. The planet had massive forests of towering structures that resembled trees but were actually colonial organisms. Vast plains rippled with what looked like black grass, but moved with purpose, like millions of tiny creatures acting as one. "Your world is incredible," Tom breathed. "It is harsh," Shadow replied. "It made us strong, perhaps too strong for our own safety." They landed in a clearing surrounded by crystalline formations that glowed with internal light. The moment they stepped outside, Tom felt the difference. Higher gravity, denser air rich with unfamiliar compounds. His environmental suit compensated, but he could still feel the weight of this alien world. "Others come," Shadow said suddenly, his posture shifting. From the shadows between the crystal structures, shapes moved with liquid grace. More Night Stalkers, at least a dozen. Their blade limbs extended in defensive positions. They surrounded the ship with frightening speed. One larger Night Stalker stepped forward, its exoskeleton bearing elaborate etchings that seemed to glow faintly. The translator struggled with the complex series of clicks and hums exchanged between Shadow and this elder. "This is Elder Knight," Shadow finally explained to Tom, "leader of our largest remaining clan." The elder circled Tom, 6 eyes examining him with unnerving intensity. "You bring a human to our sanctuary," the translator rendered. "After generations of hiding. Why?" "Humans are not our enemy," Shadow replied. "This one saved me when he could have killed me, and he has discovered the truth about our disappearing hunters." Tom explained what Blake had revealed about the Council's secret operations. As he spoke, the gathered Night Stalkers made sounds his translator couldn't interpret, but their agitated movements conveyed their distress. "We have lost 3/4 of our population in 2 generations," Elder Knight said when Tom finished. "We believed it was disease or failing adaptation. Now we know it is deliberate extinction." "I want to help," Tom said. "If the full Council and other species knew about this." "They would not care," interrupted another Night Stalker. "We are monsters to them." "Not all of them," Tom insisted. "My colleague Blake risked everything to warn us. There are others who would stand against this if they knew the truth." The elder made a gesture, and the other Night Stalkers retreated slightly. "Come, human. See what we truly are before you pledge yourself to our cause." Tom followed the Night Stalkers through their settlement. Not the primitive hunting grounds he might have expected, but a complex community. Dwellings were carved into living crystal, with intricate patterns that Tom realized were both art and written language. Young Night Stalkers, smaller but no less dangerous looking, trained in what appeared to be both combat and scientific pursuits. Most surprising was a vast underground chamber filled with technology that rivaled anything the Council possessed. "We were spacefaring before most Council races discovered fire," Elder Knight explained. "But we chose isolation for safety." "A mistake, perhaps," Shadow added. "Isolation made us myths, then monsters." A sudden alarm echoed through the chamber. A Night Stalker rushed in, communicating rapidly with the elder. "Council ships have entered our system," Shadow translated for Tom. "A full battle group. They must have followed our trajectory through the nebula." Tom's heart sank. "I led them here. I'm sorry." Elder Knight's posture shifted in what Tom now recognized as determination rather than aggression. "Perhaps it is time for hiding to end. Human, you wish to help us. Now there is no choice." On screens around the chamber, the Council Armada moved into orbit. Dozens of ships, including 3 massive Judgment-class cruisers. "They think they hunt us," Elder Knight said, blade limbs extending to their full, terrifying length. But they forget. We are the galaxy's perfect predators. Tom looked at the approaching fleet, then at the Night Stalkers preparing for battle. "There's a better way," he said. "Let me talk to them first." The Council ships formed an attack position in orbit around nightfall. Their weapon systems glowed with charged energy, ready to rain destruction on the planet below. "This is madness," Tom said, watching the tactical display in the Night Stalker command center. "They're preparing for planetary bombardment." Shadow stood beside him, dark exoskeleton reflecting the red warning lights. "They wish to end us permanently. No more hunts, no more specimens, just extinction." Elder Knight approached, followed by what Tom had learned was the Council of Hunters, the ruling body of Night Stalker society. "Our defense systems are active. We can destroy several of their ships, but not all." "Let me contact them," Tom insisted. "If I can speak to the full council, not just the corrupt faction." "They will not listen," a younger Night Stalker named Flint argued. "They have come to kill, not talk." Tom shook his head. "You've been hidden so long that myths have replaced facts. At least let me try." After a brief discussion among the Night Stalkers, Elder Knight nodded. "Proceed, human." Tom composed himself as he stepped before the communication array. This would be the most important speech of his life, possibly the last. He activated the broadcast on all frequencies, including the public channels that regular council citizens could access. "This is Thomas Reed, xenobiologist, addressing the Galactic Council fleet. I am on the Night Stalker homeworld by choice, not as a captive." The main screen flickered to life, showing Councilor Vex, a tall, severe-looking official with chrome cybernetic enhancements covering half his face. "Reed," he sneered, "you have violated multiple council directives. Surrender the specimens, and yourself immediately." "Specimens," Tom replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'm standing among a civilization older than the council itself. A civilization your secret faction has been systematically exterminating." Vex's expression hardened. "These are dangerous predators that your group has been harvesting for biological compounds." Tom interrupted. "I'm transmitting proof now." With Shadow's help, Tom broadcast the files Blake had sent. Classified council documents detailing the secret operation, including profit margins from selling Night Stalker-derived weapons. "This transmission is reaching every council world," Tom continued. "Every species will know what's being done in their name." The screen split to show other council members, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage, not at Tom, but at Vex. "These documents are forgeries," Vex sputtered. "Then explain why you've brought a battle fleet to exterminate a species without full council approval," challenged a reptilian councilor. While the council members argued, Tom gave Shadow a subtle signal. On cue, the Night Stalkers activated their planet's ancient defense systems, not to attack, but to create a spectacular display of power. Giant energy columns shot into space, surrounding the planet with a protective barrier. "The Night Stalkers could have destroyed your ships at any time," Tom explained. "They chose restraint. They've always chosen restraint." To drive the point home, Elder Knight stepped into view beside Tom. The council members fell silent at the sight of the imposing Night Stalker. "For generations, we have watched your civilizations grow." Elder Knight spoke, the translator converting his words. "We isolated ourselves because our first contact ended in the hunting of our kind. We became the monsters of your stories because it was safer than being your victims." A new voice joined the transmission. Dr. Blake, who had apparently reached a council ship. "I've reviewed all the data," Blake said. "The Night Stalkers are apex predators, yes, but also highly intelligent engineers, artists, and philosophers. Their technology might even surpass our own." The council chamber erupted in debate. Several members immediately called for Vex's arrest. Others demanded a complete investigation. "This changes nothing," Vex growled. "They're still dangerous. All species can be dangerous," Tom countered. Humans have a violent history too. The question is whether we judge entire civilizations by their potential for harm or by their actual actions. Shadow stepped forward. We offer peace, knowledge exchange, an end to hiding. The tide was turning. More council representatives spoke in favor of halting the attack. Vex's supporters found themselves increasingly isolated. As the debate raged on, Tom exchanged looks with Shadow and Elder Knight. For the first time in countless generations, the galaxy's most feared predators had hoped for a future beyond shadows. 1 month after the confrontation at nightfall, Tom Reeb stood nervously in the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of species, buzzed with anticipation. Today would mark the first official address by a Night Stalker to the assembled council. Tom tugged at his formal diplomatic uniform, still uncomfortable with his new status. After the events at nightfall, he had become something of a celebrity throughout council space. The human who befriended monsters. "They're still afraid," he murmured to Shadow, who waited with him in the antechamber. Shadow's exoskeleton had been polished to a mirror shine, adorned with the symbolic markings of an official ambassador. "Fear is natural when facing the unknown," Shadow replied. "It took you time to see beyond my appearance." "Not that much time," Tom smiled. The doors to the chamber slid open. As they walked together toward the central podium, Tom noticed how the representatives from various worlds reacted. Some leaned forward in fascination. Others shrank back instinctively. A few placed hands near concealed weapons. Former Councilor Vex and his conspirators were notably absent, now awaiting trial for crimes against sentient beings. In their place sat a new leadership committee, with Dr. Blake appointed as special scientific liaison. Elder Knight had chosen Shadow as the first Night Stalker ambassador, believing his connection with Tom would help bridge the vast gap between their world and the wider galaxy. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," Tom began, his voice carrying through the perfect acoustics. "I present Ambassador Shadow of Nightfall, who speaks for the Night Stalker Confederation." Shadow stepped forward, blade limbs carefully positioned in what his people considered a gesture of respect. Several council members flinched, but remained seated. "For too long," Shadow began, "my people have existed as nightmares in your stories. You feared us because you did not know us. Today, that changes." Over the next hour, Shadow presented the true history of his species, their ancient civilization, their decision to withdraw from galactic affairs after early encounters led to hunting and fear, their technological achievements, and their complex social structure. "We are predators by evolution," Shadow acknowledged. "But we are builders by choice. Like humans, like many of you, we have grown beyond our biological origins." When he finished, the chamber remained silent for several long moments. Then, remarkably, the representative from Taurus Prime, a prey species known for their caution, stood up. "If a human could see beyond the fearsome exterior to find an ally and friend," she said, "perhaps we all can learn to do the same." One by one, representatives voiced their support for a formal treaty with Nightfall. Not all were convinced, but enough saw the potential in peace over fear. After the session ended, Tom and Shadow walked together through the council gardens. "What will you do now?" Shadow asked. "Your scientific career was interrupted by our adventure." Tom laughed. "Adventure? Is that what we're calling it?" He looked up at the artificial sky of the council station. "Actually, I've been offered funding to establish an interspecies research center on Nightfall, if your people agree." "The Council of Hunters has already approved," Shadow replied. "They believe you have earned a place among us." 6 months later, the Nightfall Research Institute opened its doors to scientists from across the galaxy. Under Tom and Shadow's joint leadership, it quickly became the premier center for xenobiology and cultural studies. The most popular exhibit in the Institute's public museum was a simple escape pod, carefully preserved, the vessel that had brought Shadow crashing into Tom's life and changed the course of galactic history. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Tom stood with Shadow on a cliff overlooking the crystal forests of Nightfall. In the valley below, representatives from 12 species worked alongside Night Stalkers on a new habitat dome. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tom asked, "when you woke up in my lab that day?" Shadow's blade limbs gleamed in the light of Nightfall's setting sun. "Among my people, there is a saying, the best hunter sees not just what is, but what could be." Tom smiled. "On Earth, we say something similar. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith." As darkness fell over Nightfall, the planet's natural bioluminescence created a spectacular light show across the landscape. Two very different beings from worlds light years apart stood side by side, watching the lights, a reminder that sometimes understanding begins when someone defies expectations.